You're listening to The Artist Athlete, episode 58. The circus has always been a place of death-defying acts and spectacles of great beauty. But in this day and age, circus is more than tents and trains and elephants. And this podcast seeks to introduce people to this modern art form by interviewing professionals in the industry, asking them to share their stories, viewpoints, and information with all of you out there. Hey friends, fans, and enemies. I'm Shannon McKenna. I'm the host of the Artist Athlete podcast and the founder of theartistathlete.com. If this is your first time tuning into the podcast, hey, how you doing? Thanks for tuning in. You are probably wondering how it even exists, and the answer is that I made it. I'm a professional aerialist. I'm not a broadcaster or funded by any huge production company. I've just been training and teaching and traveling and performing for the past 10 years. And I started to realize there was a disconnect between the training of students that I was teaching in the US and the major circus companies that I aspired to work for in Canada and Europe. So I bought a microphone and basically just went around and started interviewing people I knew, people I had worked with, people I admired, and y'all started to listen. I'm slowly building a team of people to help me improve the quality of the podcast, and I'm paying them with the help of Patreons on patreon.com/theartistathlete. If you want to help out the podcast and get access to cool swag, go to patreon.com/theartistathlete. It's super easy to sign up. You can do it through PayPal, so your payment is secure, and you can choose how much you want to give. Every little bit helps, and I really appreciate it, as does my sound editor and Hannah, my assistant. My guest today is Sarah Poole. Sarah graduated from Southern Methodist University and performed for many years as a contemporary dancer in New York City. She discovered circus arts after arriving in Montreal in 2003 and performed aerial work in corporate events with Cirque du Soleil while beginning to teach aerial work. She has taught and performed in aerial dance festivals in France, Ireland, and the US. She is a 2008 graduate of the National Circus School in Montreal's teacher training program and teaches aerial disciplines at the École Nationale du Cirque, specifically in rope, dance trapeze, aerial hoop, tissue, and much more. In the interview, Sarah mentions Fred Deb, who has also been on this podcast. She is back on episode 9. So it's not integral to this interview that you know exactly who she is, but she is a very notable person in the circus world and definitely in aerial arts and definitely in aerial silks or tissue. So you might want to go check out that interview after you listen to this one. Here's my interview with Sarah Poole. Sarah Poole, yeah. Welcome to the Artist Athlete podcast.
Thank you so much, Shannon. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you for this spread of delicious Swiss cheese and mushrooms.
It's like all cheese.
I'm not mad at it.
There we go. Great. Yeah.
What do you do? Who are you?
My name is Sarah Poole, and I live in Montreal, Quebec. And I work mostly as a coach and a choreographer of aerial disciplines. And I'm sort of a gun for hire. Like, I work in different places. I've coached the National Circus School, l'École Nationale du Cirque, for the last 12 years now. And I've also had the opportunity, I coach often for Cirque du Soleil, for Cirque du Soleil. Once I coached on a project for the Seven Fingers. And I'm lucky enough that people I don't even know will contact me on the magical internet and be like, hey, Sarah Poole, so-and-so recommended me to you. I would really like to come to Montreal and I'm going to live there for a few months and I'd like to build an act with you. Or I'd like to change some skills or learn some new skills or develop new skills, or I'd like to take my old act and have your feedback on it. And so I do that. And I work mostly in aerial disciplines, rope, tissue, dance trapeze. For my history, I was a dancer before I was an aerialist. I moved to Montreal from New York in 2003. I injured my knee, and while I was waiting to have my knee surgery, which was
that super cheap too in Montreal?
It was free because we have National Health Service here.
We do.
Yeah, but for sure, I had to wait about a year before I could have it because it's a pretty minor surgery, but like it's one that with an aging population, many people need. So when I was waiting to have that surgery, I couldn't grand plier, I couldn't do stuff that was low to the floor. I just torn a meniscus. But I found that I could climb tissue, and I found that I could hang from my knees on a trapeze. And so my life started moving towards the aerial side of things. I'd always been curious about circus. When I first came to Montreal in the summer of 2001, I was talking to a woman, actually, Jenny Jacinto, who's a contortionist. Yeah. And Jenny was taking the workshop I was taking with Vertigo, and I was like, yeah, I've always wanted to try flying trapeze. And she's like, oh, there's just this place down the road where you can do it. And I was like, huh? What? So I got up my courage and I tried it, and I was like, oh, this is amazing. Wow. But, flying trapeze was fun, but it wasn't going to be more than that because I wasn't, I'm not going to put myself in a troupe situation and spend 12 hours a day going up and down ladders and doing those amazing things. And as a dancer, you don't really have I shouldn't say that because I think nowadays dancers actually really do have a lot of acrobatic things that often are a part of their training. I did not.
Were you classical ballet?
Yeah,
Is that
I did. Growing up, I did classical ballet. And then when I hit sort of university age and I knew that I wanted to go to university, that's when I sort of discovered modern dance and contemporary dance. And I was like, oh yeah, this makes more sense for me and who I am and how I think and how I want to move and have a little bit more space for me.
So you came up in Montreal
to dance.
And then your circus training happened in Montreal.
Okay. Yeah. I did have some forays, like when I first met Fred Deb. One of the things that was great was I was here and I got a grant from the Conseil des Arts et Lettres de Québec to actually go to the Aerial Dance Festival in Colorado where Fred was teaching for the first time. I went there and I met her and her family and sort of had a bond with her there. And then the next summer, Fred asked me to be her assistant in class. And then later, Fred actually asked me to start teaching in her festival and stuff like that. So I feel like Fred is somebody who taught me not only a lot about how to use my body in the tissue and how to perform, but she also taught me a lot about teaching, which was really great to have that contact with her. But yeah, most of what I learned here. So that's sort of weird, because I'm from the United States. I learned all my vocabulary in French. I learned most of my concepts in French. And then it's like something like a movement that we would in French say, we call it like vrille ouvert arrêt jarret, which means open, twist, stop it with your knee. Like I go to the States or with people from the States and they're like, oh, you mean the beehive? And I'm like, I guess.
Sure.
Okay, sure. Whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I know people are like, what do you call this move? And I'm like, I don't know. What do you call this move? Because I know about 12 different names for it.
Totally. And I can't keep them straight. And, and then sometimes I think it's great just to call them like Flippy Flippy Shabang, because it kind of doesn't really matter what the word is, as long as like we're on the same page about what it actually means. So
totally.
Yeah.
So it sounds like Fred was kind of your foray into teaching.
Kind of, yeah. I think it happened before that. One of the amazing things about Montreal is that there are training spaces, I think not enough anymore, but training spaces where if you want to learn, it actually is accessible for you. And there is a space called La Caserne. And at La Caserne, I met a woman who was like one of the first people to do trapeze in Montreal. Her name was Marité Lessard. She was teaching me fixed trapeze, and
which people know in the States probably is like static trapeze.
Exactly.
Or the trapeze with two ropes and the bar that's not on a single point.
Exactly. I hope I'm not annoying. I kind of like anglify French words sometimes. So if I say the wrong thing, tell me.
No, you're not. It's just
I'm
like
just making up words.
For our listeners at home, this is what you might call this.
Fantastic.
Tissue was aerial silks or
there
whatever.
We go.
That kind of thing.
Yeah. So Marité then asked me to be her assistant in like an evening class.
What is it about you that people are like, hey, you should help out with this?
Well, I think I was old. Yeah. No joke. Like,
no, that's real.
I was in my 30s.
Okay.
Yeah, 30, 31. I'm 47 right now, in case anybody's wondering.
She doesn't look a day over 22, guys.
And it's okay if I do. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
But and I think coming from a dance background, I wanted to sort of understand what I was doing as I was doing it, or even before I was doing it. Like a really good friend of mine, I remember taught me how to do my first drop on tissue. And try to imagine like I'm being taught in French, and this is a Brazilian person like teaching me like on the ground. He's like, okay, climb. Now go upside down, hook your knee, wrap the thing, climb up. And he's like, okay, let go. And I'm like, let go of what? Let go of where? No fucking way. Is there any letting go happening here? You're not used to doing that kind of flippy stuff if that's not a part of your background. So I wanted to be able to understand and take things apart in a way that my body could understand the pattern of what it was doing before I was, 12, 10, 15 feet in the air or whatever doing it. So I think being an old dog, I needed to understand the trick that people wanted me to do.
Yeah.
So that was sort of like the physical part of it. And then, I don't know, I think there's also the part of me that is, I think the thing that feeds my teaching now is everything that I bring with me from having gone through a dance training and having been a dancer and having sort of those kinds of values or observations or pathways into discovering new stuff. And there are so many different approaches to teaching. I think I really, when I decided to sort of say, okay, I don't need to perform anymore, and it really felt like I didn't need myself to be at the center anymore. And so I was actually really happy just to be like, great, I'm going to embrace this. And I had gone to National Circus School. I had been teaching in Montreal, and I wanted to sort of up my game and get more information and more skills and different approaches. And they've had a coach training program there for a while. It's sort of a year-long intensive thing. And I went to do it. And while I was doing it, they asked me to start teaching at the school and replacing people and stuff. And then I started teaching at the school. Teaching is learning all the time.
Oh my gosh. It's
amazing.
I find like I was not half the technician or artist I am now without all the teaching that I've done.
Exactly.
For sure.
It is fascinating and challenging, and you use your creativity, and it is like such a privilege. ENC is a very special context, and when people contact me and they want to work with me, it's a super special context as well, because it's sort of like somebody saying like, hey, will you walk this path with me?
Oh.
How gorgeous is that?
Yeah.
Like, sure, okay, I'll give you whatever I've got. I hope it's useful. I really want it to be useful and support you with who you are as a person and as an artist with where you want to go.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a shift in teaching. It's funny because it's a very different thing. For me, it's not necessarily, I really don't care what somebody calls me. But I had in the same week somebody tell me like, oh my God, you're not just a coach, you're a teacher. And then somebody else said to me, oh my God, you're not just a teacher, you're a coach. And I'm like, wow, this is beautiful from both of you people. And I'm really, really honored. And who cares what the word is? Kind of like the name of the trick doesn't matter, I suppose. But
do you see, that's an interesting like delineation, because there are people who I see as more of like, I go to you because you have the technical knowledge that I need for the tricks.
Yeah.
And then there are people who I know who like, they have concepts or insights or like a way of bringing out something or a collaboration. Do you see yourself as one or the other?
No. And I don't, man, this is a really interesting thing. So I'm doing a master's part-time now too. And I think in the same indie program that Alison Funk did for her master's at Concordia, where it's sort of like, circus studies doesn't exist. Let's just, why don't you make up a program and defend it and then, work towards it. So one of the things that I'm looking at is, what do contemporary coaches, like what are we actually doing in a higher level circus education? Because I think circus training has actually shifted a lot, and it needs to. I think there was a way of training, and there is a way of training that a lot of people I think would call behaviorism, and there are people who can speak so much more eloquently to education theory than I can right now. So I'm not the sole authority on this at all. But behaviorist training is sort of like kind of what we would have in classical ballet training, or kind of like how you would train your dog, where it's basically like, do the thing, you get a reward, do the thing, you get a reward. So
it's like a Pavlovian or Skinnerian kind of like,
or it's like, you get like a return on or a response to what you did all the time, and there are patterns, and it's like about repeating actions so that they get established in your body all the time, which is great, which has its place. And then what that means though is that you always keep repeating the same things, and there's not this evolution of what is possible, perhaps, because you have these certain things that are installed in you as like a way of responding to things, and that's controlled and great. So, and education used to be a lot about that. Even I think education in the public school or whatever.
Yeah. Do you need to get that?
No, I don't.
Okay.
So then I think what's happening now is that we're sort of starting to look at things from a more constructivist perspective. And everybody who knows all stuff about education theory, sorry if I'm completely bullying this, but
I'm sure we'll get hundreds of
exactly
emails like,
so what is going on?
I don't know.
So there's a dude named Jean Piaget, who's a philosopher dude. Constructivism, to me, the way that I'm interpreting it, means that you learn by constructing from experiences. So instead of me as a teacher going into a room and saying, you student, do this, part of my job as a teacher is to go in and create means for you to experience different things and to figure out physically, mentally, whatever, what I need you or want you to figure out by this sort of experiential framework that I'm putting around you. Mm-hmm. So can I, like a climb is a climb, right? But if I want you to start investigating how there are different ways that you can climb, maybe I'm going to teach in a way where I'm asking you questions instead of telling you what to do. Or what would happen if you did this? Take a big step back. I think there's a way of teaching now where the teacher is not at the center of the class.
Mm-hmm.
The student is at the center of the class.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of teaching is about how do I create a safe space so that my student, as they're learning, is not going to get hurt, but give them space to experiment and experience and find their own paths. And for me, especially in circus, this is absolutely necessary because part of the job of a circus artist, or part of what we hope, is that they're going to be able to innovate within their own art form. And if
this is what we were talking about before. When I was like, we've got to get the recorder. And we were talking about dancers as having value only when they were hired by a choreographer.
Yeah.
Whereas a circus artist, what were you saying?
So I was talking about my own experience as a dancer. It was sort of like you go out into the world and, you know, you graduate from these conservators or whatever, and they're like, bye, good luck getting a job. You know, you're like, okay, how do I tell myself that I have value if nobody's hiring me or whatever? And circus artists, it's not that they're supposed to be able to give a choreographer exactly what they want all the time. Right. A circus artist is supposed to be able to be the author of their own work. Mm-hmm. Which and creating work is not just about creating a sequence of movements. Like, for me, there's a whole compositional thing that they have to be able to do related to their sort of bag of tools that they have, which are movements that they've mastered, or perhaps movements that they've discovered, or movements that they've created themselves. A circus artist is supposed to be unique in what they are able to bring to the art form. And if we believe in a world where everybody is unique already, so it's sort of like, okay, well, who are you? And who are you when you say this? And who are you when you execute this movement, even if it's a movement that everybody else does? Like, can you show me something that is uniquely you about it?
Do you think contemporary circuit, I'm just thinking, going back to like this idea that like repetition or behaviorism was the way we train, and now there's been this shift into more, what did you call it? The Piaget kind of
the constructivism.
Constructivism, right?
That's just a pedagogical approach. I don't know that it's necessarily there for everybody.
Yeah.
For me, in the way that I want to teach, that's a part of how I approach it.
Okay. Because
at the end of the day, whoever I work with, I don't want them to ever feel like they need me.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
I really like the idea of teaching where, even if the person that you're working with is a child, like, there's the teacher and there's the student, but you come into this space and you recognize that that person has expertise already just from having been on the planet.
Wow.
I also have expertise. And so then that way of teaching and learning actually becomes a dialogue. Mm-hmm. This is very easy when you work at a place like National Circus School, where it's like, I'm working with 1 or 2, possibly 3 students maximum at a time.
Right. If and their vocabulary and what they've done on the planet thus far
might be
has caused them to be in a very rigorous selection program. And you're dealing with
or people who are professionals.
Athletes.
I still think that there is definitely space, though, even if you're working in a different context, a recreational context, where you have a group of students where you can start to introduce them actually to be working creatively. Mm-hmm. And I think it's actually really necessary that we do that. Because if we're just stuck in as teaching this formulaic sort of like, did you get the trick? Woo, yay. Then it's just not going to evolve. Like, you don't go to class if you're in ballet just for the pirouettes.
Yeah, right? Totally.
You learned how to master your body, and the skills that you're going to teach or decide to teach are related to how you want your student to master their body in relationship to their apparatus. So it's not necessarily to get the thing just to get the thing, because otherwise all we are as teachers are vocabulary dictionaries. And that's really disappointing.
I have a friend who talks about it as if like she feels like sometimes a trick vending machine.
Yeah.
Or like she'll show up and people are like, what's the new trick? What's the new drop? What's the new thing?
So, and that's the thing. Can you inspire somebody to be curious? Can you inspire somebody and give them the tool to actually make their own new thing? It doesn't have to be new to the planet.
Yeah.
Even if it's new to them. For me, that's incredibly valuable. And then that, for me as a teacher, becomes more interesting than being the vending machine or the dictionary or whatever.
Totally. Yeah. I wonder, though, I think about a lot, or lately, I guess I've been thinking about this, like the historic, circus and how it's moving technically. Do you know, that there are people now who are doing, and there are probably people who have always been doing, double pirouettes on the rope.
Yeah.
Or those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Do you find that in conflict with this way of teaching that's much more about the constructivist or the...
Not at all. Not at all. Yeah. So
it's kind of like the innovation versus the expectation of death-defying ridiculousness.
Yeah, or just virtuosic movement. But one of the weird things is when you realize, and I'm sure you realize this as a performer too, people are blown away just seeing you at the top of your tissue. They don't need you to do anything, right? So we as people who like to go further in what we can do with our bodies and all of that are perhaps always on the quest for I'm going to do the next biggest thing or whatever. We want to see just how far we can take it. So absolutely, I love virtuosic movement and I love high technical level. But there's always a part of me that wonders though, well, could you make me cry? With your pirouette, your double pirouette? Could you tell me something about what it is for you to be a person on this planet? Like, what are you trying to express through this movement? And that's when that sort of becomes choreographic. In dance and in a dancer's training, often you learn about composition. Composition often, at the beginning at least, is always these rules that are sort of made in relationship to music. Music was very, back in the day, is super structured, and you have like repetition, theme and variation, retrograde inversions. Like if you look at Bach and Mozart and all those dudes, they had like these codes that they were sort of like doing, oh, I made my musical phrase do this, and now I'm going to manipulate my musical phrase and make it do that. Dancers sort of learn about that as well.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's one of the things that actually, when you see, wow, dance can actually like ride with music in such a really intense, beautiful way where like the dance and the music actually make each other greater when they're together. They can add something to it. And when I first started working in sort of circus or aerial work, I was like, wow, nobody repeats anything. And I'm sort of like, well, no, because it's all about like the vocabulary that you're presenting and you just got to do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing.
Right. You start with like your second biggest trick and you end with your biggest trick.
Exactly.
And stuff happens in the middle.
Yeah. So I'm going to say something really inappropriate. It's sort of like the circus orgasm, basically, where it's like little trick, bigger, bigger, bigger. Oh my God. And then you're done.
I love that.
It's over. Yeah.
Right?
So
yeah,
I said
watch
it's
Netflix
bad. Yeah. I don't know.
Cigarette.
TMI. Yeah. So, but it doesn't all have to be that way. And I think there's space for that too. If that's what people want to make, if that's what people like to make in terms of acts, that's beautiful. That's great. And that totally works. But if you want to actually work differently, work scenically, just using the stage space, if you want to work musically, there are so many different ways where you can actually take what you know physically in terms of movement or skills, some people call them tricks, and then see how they can fit differently together. One of the things that I really love about like being a part of the last sort of 15 years of aerial work changing is that now for me, often the going up is as interesting as the coming down. is
For
when I
sure.
look at rope work or when I look at tissue. And it's like, yeah, that's great. I also love in dance trapeze people who can go, you know, seamlessly in and out of the floor and up to the rope and down, and you have no idea how they got there, and you have no idea what they're going to do next. And for sure, I love a good flippy flippy shebang. Like, that's awesome. That's awesome. But I also love it when the stuff that is new and different is hidden so well in how something is constructed that it doesn't stand out like, and now the big trick is coming. And they do the thing and everybody goes, wah!
There's
like,
the drum roll.
Oh my God. Great. Yeah. That super works. That's a part of circus's DNA. But there's space for other things to happen too. So there's also, I think sometimes in the contemporary circus, there's people who are like, yeah, I don't give a crap about virtuosity. I'm so not interested at all.
Yeah.
Great. There's space for that too. Like, I think we're in a place where whatever you want to explore in the circus body, like, there's going to be an audience for that. So do your thing.
That's so cool. What's it like teaching at the school versus, like, what's it like teaching at the school?
It's awesome.
Yeah. What's day-to-day life there? Do you have the same students every day? Do you send them for classes?
It depends. I work mostly in the college program, but I also work a little bit with some kids this year anyway, who are in the high school program, because they sort of have a high school where they like, there's about 30 of them in like all 5 years of high school, and they do half their day academic classes and then half their day circus classes.
Wow.
So I teach mostly specialty disciplines, either for, in the college program, people who are majoring in a certain subject or people who are minoring in a certain subject.
And do you choose them, or do they, how does that happen?
That happens by the pedagogical direction of the school.
Okay, so you're just kind of assigned people.
You're assigned people.
Okay.
And often the chemistry is great.
Cool.
Yeah. And it is amazing because I think I already said this and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but it's a privilege to be able to do that with somebody. And like, to have, when you work for a company, like as a coach or choreographer or whatever, it's such a short period of time. And there's like, you have 3 months and this has to be ready, or shorter than that.
Sure.
And you're working with people who maybe you haven't met before, and there's a product and they want the thing and it's got to be whatever it is that they decide. Yeah. Here, you've got 3 years, sometimes 4 years to walk with somebody, to help them figure out, who they are, what they want to say, what they want to do. And that's pretty amazing. Also, the school has amazing facilities too, and people who maintain those amazing facilities.
I know it.
Like, what a luxury to show up somewhere and that your points have been inspected and are safe. And if you find anything that seems the littlest bit like problematic, or, oh my gosh, this pulley is squeaking, eeky, eeky, you go and you find a rigger and they come and they fix it. Like, they are always on call, they are always there, and they're always super knowledgeable. So that's a huge privilege too.
Yeah.
So studios with amazing height. Oh man, because for my master's, I was taking classes sometimes at McGill in their education department, and I was with teachers who teach real things. Like, they're in high school. No, but you know what I mean? Like, they're in high school. Yes, like
things
math.
That I hear.
They have to go to school, and their job is to convince 30 people to be interested in math.
Ugh.
And those people have to then pass an exam.
Yeah.
I don't have to convince anybody to be interested in what I have to offer.
Sure.
Because they are already interested themselves. So that's pretty crazy and pretty luxurious. Yeah. It's a different thing because also I think the job is not to impose who I am or what I think. about art and the universe on this person.
Yeah.
It's a lot about being able to listen to this developing person and hear where they are, and also sometimes confront them with stuff, because it's not just like, oh, we'll go wherever you want to go. Like, there are things that are realities and expectations and different ideas.
This was going to be my question, actually, because you don't teach real things. Like math, so people don't have to pass exams, but there is an expectation at the school.
And there are exams. Like, they are classes. Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And like, people you can fail circus school. I don't think people realize that. Like,
for sure.
So, and I guess you don't really have to answer this if you don't want to, but like, what is it like as a teacher to have to kind of ensure that your students are filling those obligations in an art school context?
It's really, so I think one of the things that I really like about circus is the in-betweenness of things. It's sort of like this super sporty thing and this art thing, right? And and it's between...
It's almost like the people are artists, athletes.
Oh my God.
Ding, ding,
ding. So, yeah. And so I think that when you're talking about art, that there's nothing that is objective, right?
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Can you recognize your own subjectivity, which is super important?
Yeah.
And then be able to say, and be able to then give feedback to somebody and reflect, this is what I see, this is what I perceive, but this is also where I come from with all of that. And when you're in a dance conservatory environment, you learn a lot about giving and receiving feedback. And actually at the school, we also are starting to implement ways of, a woman named Nicola Gard actually took a methodology of feedback that came from a theater or performance art school in the Netherlands called Des Arts. And she adapted that to sort of the circus context. And it's a way of trying to give a circus artist feedback on their work, which doesn't actually put them in the regular place, which has been in academia for a long time, of defending your work. I don't know if you had that when you were like presenting work.
Did I have that?
A lot of my friends who did like visual art, they would like present projects and they would actually like go before a jury, and then they would have to like defend what they had done.
Oh,
and
interesting.
A lot of that becomes about the personalities of the jurors, and it can also get very, very personal. And then that actually is not useful to the person who's receiving the feedback, because they're always just being sort of put in, they're confronting what the juror person wants.
Right. And it's about the juror's taste, not their own.
And it's not about hearing what the person is trying to create or show, and did that work or did that not work? And if so, well, it didn't work for me because I'm situated in this kind of world. Or so how can we actually... Can a person define better what it is that they want to be saying through their work? And then can they actually hear what an audience is receiving from it? And then can they go, oh, okay, well, what my audience is receiving is not actually what I'm trying to give. So then can I go back and actually adapt what it is that I'm saying if I really want to say that? Or, hey, maybe I'm going to take this in a whole different direction. Yeah. There are so many possibilities when you start to broaden your perspective of performance. It's completely valuable to have it be like, I'm gonna do some really cool stuff and y'all gonna sit there and you're gonna watch me do it and give me some claps because I'm super completely valuable. But there's also something to be said for, I'm going to interpret this idea or this color or this moment in my life and use my body and my apparatus as the vehicle for that. Then you have to say, well, are people actually getting what it is that I'm saying or not?
Right.
Yeah.
And do I care?
And do I care? Kind of, personally, I would love for people to care. Even though it's open-ended, right? Like the body speaks for me like a poem. But I also think that if you let the body speak its truth, that often we'll be able to hear it really well and receive it. And sometimes I think we get so preoccupied with whatever people are going to think that actually impedes us from actually being telling the truth.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Dude. This is awesome. So we're at like 41, 42. Yeah. My last question to people is always, what advice would you give to yourself at the beginning of your career? It's not always. Sometimes I don't ask that question.
Yeah.
And this has been such an interesting interview because I just let you talk.
Oh, that's great.
Usually I'm like, what was your life like? Like, what is the trajectory? But you have so many cool thoughts about teaching. And
do you want to ask me more of those questions?
I don't know.
I can talk longer if you want.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter. I don't want to waste your time, though.
No, oh my God, you're not wasting my time at all. No, I'm just curious, like, what, if you could go back, would you have been an artist, like a circus artist earlier? Do you wish you had found it, or like...
Yeah, I think so. I think I wish I had found it earlier, and I think maybe I wish that I had taken some gymnastics classes a little earlier.
Me too.
But the great thing when you sometimes are teaching and it's not stuff that necessarily comes from your background is that you can, you teach stuff that you don't do yourself. Like, and I think all the coaches at ENC teach stuff that they have never done themselves, like every day.
Yeah.
And because the point is that to help somebody else make up something that they can do.
Right. And the point is to teach something that no one has ever done.
Exactly.
Right?
And let them find that themselves and to help them along that path. And that's actually, when I work with people who are not at ENC as well, it's like that same kind of work that can happen. So yeah, maybe I would have wanted to find circus and to find aerials earlier. I think I would have told myself to be braver, I think. Yeah. And to trust my voice. Yeah. Maybe that's just the musings of a Thursday evening, but
totally.
I think it's that. No, but I think if we worry so much about, I think there's a lot of preoccupation in dance of wanting to do the thing that people are going to like us for and do it right for the person who's the choreographer or whatever, because that's essentially the job. Like, you have to be able to give them what they want the way that they want it often.
Sure.
Just different choreographers are working differently now. Sometimes it's like, okay, gang, I'm working on this as an idea. Can you propose something like that? And the dancer is often much more implicated in the process. But I feel like, especially learning every day, watching people and working with people as they make their own work in circus, if they make something that feels true to them, then it always works. But if they start from the place of worrying about if someone is going to like their work or not, or should I put this movement in because this will get me a job? Or what will people think if I do this? Starting from that usually doesn't make a cohesive piece, and it doesn't ring true. So yeah, I think I would have told myself to be braver.
Be brave.
Be brave, y'all.
I love that. Thanks, Sarah.
You're welcome.
That was my interview with Sarah Poole. It was such a delightful time hanging out with Sarah. She invited me over to her house. We had an amazing cheese platter and just a really great time talking. Sarah had so much to say in this interview, and I wanted to review a few things and kind of flesh out some concepts that she started to talk about. In the interview, Sarah says that her inspiration, or her approach, comes from a more constructivist model. And she mentions philosopher-psychologist Jean Piaget, who in addition to inventing peekaboo, that's a little psychology joke for anybody who really cares about object permanence. Piaget had this idea that people learned through experience. So you would do something and you would gather information and you would be able to translate or adapt that information. So, for example, a constructivist's approach to teaching someone how to put on a footlock would be maybe asking questions. What would happen if you wrapped the fabric around your foot one way versus the other? What would happen if the fabric were tight? What would happen if the fabric were loose? And through experimentation, the student, the learner, would be gathering the experience of the information. And that's how they would learn. This is different from the behaviorism model, which kind of started with the work of Pavlov. He was doing experiments on dogs, and he would feed the dogs, and before the dogs were fed, there would be a bell that rang. And he noticed that the dogs would start to salivate when the bell rang before they got the food. Then he realized that if he just rang the bell, the dogs would still salivate, even if they never got the reward of food, after over time learning that the ringing of the bell meant they would receive food. And B.F. Skinner took this to the next level when he started to study operant conditioning and punishment versus reward systems. In circus, this would look like tying a foot knot a certain way and the teacher giving you praise or a negative feedback. And through repetition, you would learn the quote unquote correct way to do it over and over again. And now I believe that each of these learning styles, and there are many more teaching styles and approaches, are valuable. But it's just interesting to hear Sarah talk about her ideas behind how that progresses the art form and how her work as a dancer has informed this kind of more constructivist way of teaching. The beautiful thing about Sarah, and what struck me so much in this interview, is how she said multiple times that it was a privilege to be a teacher, that she removes herself from the center of the experience of learning for a student. And I think for artists, this is super valuable. If you are trying to make work, if you are trying to find your voice, if you are trying to be brave and go out in the world and make the thing, I think reliance on someone else's idea of what is good, I think reliance on what other people think about you or your work can be really dangerous. And becoming dependent on one person's idea of what works, what doesn't work, what's good, what's bad, can hinder growth. And this works even on a level of if you're always relying on a teacher to teach you tricks, if you're always coming to class or always wanting to learn the next thing without really understanding the why or the how or the intricacies of it, you're missing out on a huge part of the artistry of aerial and I think of all circus arts. And I think we could probably expand this to a lot of life. I don't want to get too preachy. It's 11 o'clock at night and my editor is screaming at me to get this submitted. Sarah, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. If you want to work with Sarah or contact her, she is on Facebook, Sarah Poole. Her name has an E at the end, so it's SarahPoole. And she is a fabulous instructor teaching in Montreal. For training tips and inspiration, you can follow me on Instagram at _artist_athlete. I'm on Facebook, The Artist Athlete, and my website is theartistathlete.com. Thanks so much for listening, friends, fans, and enemies. I will talk at you next week. The Artist Athlete podcast is supported solely by donations from people like you. Here's what some of those people have to say.
Aloha! My name is Beth Russell, and I live on the beautiful island of Maui, Hawaii. I am an aerial artist and movement instructor specializing in chakra yoga to keep me balanced and grounded. I play with silks, trapeze, lyra, rope, acro, aerial yoga and dance, slacklining, pole, bungee, and climbing. Really anything that goes up and allows me to explore 3D space. You can find my dedicated aerial page on Instagram at Maui Aerialist. If you find yourself coming to Maui, let's play.
Hey there, friends, fans, and enemies. This is Chris Alston, Patreon of the Artist Athlete Podcast, straps artist and lyra performer and acrobat out of Greenville, South Carolina. So, if you're ever passing through, make sure to stop in and see me and my friends. We have a wonderful space, and we'd love to see you.
Hi, my name is Erica Lee. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm an aerialist. I teach performing arts to elementary school during the day and do pole and slings and rope by night. I really like the Artist Athlete podcast because it gives me a lot of circus goals to look forward to. It gives me a lot of insight on what's going on around the world in circus, and that's why I'm Patreon.
Hello all. Thank you for tuning in to the Artist Athlete podcast. I am Opal Schwartz from Minneapolis, Minnesota. If you're ever in the cities, feel free to stop by the Aviary Minneapolis. It's a great time. With that, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week, and goodbye.